Very warm welcome, everybody, to our council meeting of the 24th of April. If we could all please stand for our opening karakia. Te tawa mai runga, te tawa mai ao, te tawa mai roto, te tawa mai waho, kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haunie, huie, tai kie. Just a reminder that this meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page. We have apologies today from Councillors Brown and Gregg. If I could have a mover and seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Parihara and Councillor Bogue. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Any conflicts of interest? Very good. Now, we do have a guest with us today in our public forum. And I would like to welcome Irene Cahill, who is here to speak to us about the Eskdale Cemetery, to come to the front. A very warm welcome, Irene.
Right. Can you hear me all?
And yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present my oral submission, given the written one regrettably was done very hastily a day before submissions closed on the Parks and Reserve Plan. I wanted to speak to approximately 1 hectare of land behind the formal part of Eskdale Cemetery. Since my written submission, I was invited to meet with Amelia Longley, your planner, and Mike Albardi, your asset manager, to discuss in more detail the submission. At the meeting, which 2 of the local landowners attended, we were advised we would need to demonstrate a greater level of support from the community, that a potential wetland tended to be problematic and would need Hawke's Bay Regional Council input. And as Mike made very clear to us, there was no spare money. Now look, they were just doing their job. But I got the impression from them that they were supportive, but not that supportive of that. The local landowners were concerned that there were several trees that had been removed post the cyclone, but they were on a tilt, but there were several trees still left, and they were on a tilt, and should they fall, they would land in the cemetery itself, damaging the graves. Since then, the council staff have come out and have identified possibly up to 5 trees that may need to be removed, and Amelia addressed some of the maintenance issues around signage that the local landowners had raised. At this meeting, we were told that this submission should really be addressed at the annual plan review, but I was to understand the Parks and Reserve process does feed into the annual plan. Subsequently, council staff have suggested this forum would be better placed to present my submission. So with this all in mind, I briefly want to explain the vision and to demonstrate at short notice the support we have. I have sent to your staff emails of support from the 2 direct adjacent neighbours, Eskdale School, Bayview Community Trust, and so far there has been no objections raised from the families of the descendants that reside in the cemetery or the RSA. I am a member of the Esk River Care Group, which undertook a significant planting project on Crown land between Eskdale Park and Waipunga Bridge over a 3-year period pre-cyclone Gabriel. This became an annual project for the whole of Eskdale School, and with the support of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, PanPac, an anonymous donor through Bayview Community Trust, which saw the school and the community plant 15,000 native trees. We're a small group that have been able to apply for independent funding at minimal cost to the Crown, as they owned the land that we planted, Hastings District or Hawke's Bay Regional Council to achieve such goals. The group is currently constructing a nursery on PanPac land, and we will be joined by a group of Department of Conservation volunteers who previously operated a nursery on the Landcorp farm with a view of growing natives to be donated and or sold at discounted prices to those in the local area, PANPAC and the Department of Conservation. We also have a website if you'd like to check our credentials, Bayview Esk River Care Group. The Bayview Community Trust have advised that if the Eskdale Cemetery project was to progress, then they are holding some funds that they could go to the project. And as a group, we would apply for funds from alternative sources to assist in the project based on an approved plan. We would anticipate, due to funding constraints, as we all know you have, and a need to allow several years to get rid of the invasive species, that the project could take up to 5 years. When I made the submission, I did not think the land would constitute as a wetland, given the seeding poplars, wilding pines, and an array of other invasive weed species, but I have since obtained an opinion from Hawke's Bay Regional Council Catchment Management Lead, Annabelle Beattie, who deemed where the arum lilies would be classified as a wetland, and this is new information I have passed to your staff, if anyone wants to make a reference to that. Note, this was done on an informal basis, but she clearly defines a wetland in this information that I've provided. Okay, the plan. As this land behind the cemetery drains 2 valleys and the base of the gully is full of arum lilies, it may be possible just to spray them out as opposed to digging them out. And during this time, as the hill slopes on either side are not defined as wetland, we would start a program of planting the surrounding hills with native plants. It would take at least 2 to 3 years to kill the arum lilies, and then we start planting with appropriate grasses, flaxes and cabbage trees in the flat land. But what do we require? Well, we need from the council, firstly, is permission. We would like to explore the potential of some financial support and or practical help in providing, 1, a basic bench track which would provide access for council staff and those volunteering, who are often old codgers like me, and in our case, children from Eskdale School, to access the area and to undertake weed eradication and planting of new species. And number 2, given the council has its own staff who are experienced in parks and reserve maintenance, we would appreciate help with the initial spraying work and possibly dropping of the young seeding poplars. The vision, longer term, is to have the gully and surrounding hills replanted with appropriate native species, possibly a little bench seat above the base of the gully for reflection, given many people today are cremated and do not have a plot in the cemetery. My personal thought was, if there was support, then at that same time, could we add a stormwater function to what would become a native wetland? There are many such gullies that feed into the Esk Valley, and any detention of rainwater in intense weather events will reduce the risk of surface flooding, which is not uncommon, particularly in the lower Esk. In intense rain events, currently the graves closest to the wilderness area will have surface water present, so it would be good if this could be mitigated. Could this project be an example of what could be achieved further up the valley? I appreciate the stormwater function could be a bridge too far, but I do feel we should be put on the table, and possibly regional council input would be required, but please, could we consider this? In summary, when I read your Parks and Reserve plan, there was specific reference to community involvement and a strong emphasis on encouraging biodiversity. With the help of Hawke's Bay Regional Council and Napier City Council staff, I believe we could set up a 4 to 5 year project that would easily meet all the goals within the existing Parks and Reserves plan. The school would like to be involved from the beginning, as I would imagine they would put some educational programs around the wetland. Esk River Care Group could grow the plants and arrange for the plantings. Then we would need working bees on removing residual invasive species after the initial spraying, and this would be done by the community in conjunction with Napier City Council. There is a movement by another group to access some donated funds to repair and enhance the existing cemetery and possibly increase the size of the commemorative wall, allowing more plaques. So couple that with a place of solace and reflection in the natives behind the cemetery, I think would be quite fitting. I've got some photographs just to help you understand what I'm referring to, if that's okay. So just if I bring this up. So that's looking from the cemetery into the gully, and you'll see that the land actually goes all the way up those hills to the far part of the trees. Those big pine trees on the left are, I think, the boundary. This is on the reverse, looking back from the boundary fence through to it. As you can see, all those arum lilies, that seed everywhere. This is the boundary fence, so it goes up the hill at the back, and private land on the other side. And this picture here is on the other way, looking on the other boundary fence. You can't see anything for the weeds, really. So I don't know if any of you know about this bit of land. It's probably lost and not forgotten. But we think we could turn it in, with the help of Napier City Council, we could turn it into something pretty nice, actually, and not really expensive. The main expense is actually, we would leave all the good trees, even though if they're exotic, that's great, we just plant around them. We talked to Mike Elbari, we said we could just drop the trees and they could rot even if it was costly to take them away. Although some of those wilding pines are very old and they would have a firewood value, I would believe. So if the council did see support or merit in this project, we would be very happy to get together and create a planting plan and a program with your staff and go from there. And by that stage, we would have some degree on costs. And that would also allow us to apply for funding, because there are avenues for wetland plantings. It could be a couple of thousand here and a couple of thousand there, but we've shown through our work at Estelle, in the previous work that we've done along the Esk River, even though it's pretty much all gone now, that we can actually achieve this. So that's my story.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Is there any questions?
Irene. Yeah, I will open up for questions to councillors. Councillor Price.
Great vision, Irene, and you certainly have the support of the community behind you. I'd like to foreshadow as a minor matter, the council receive and give a report on this to follow it through.
What's it, sorry?
I'll bring up it as a minor matter that puts it into the system, I suppose you could say.
Thank you.
I do go to the Bayview resident meetings, and they do have a little bit of funding, and they can get funding, so it'd be good to get together probably a little bit more formally and work together. But yeah, well done.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Irene?
No.
No? As Councillor Price has said, really admire your vision and the work that you've already done to date, Irene, with regards to this space. And I understand Councillor Crystal has spoken to you
Yes.
about a reserve that we have at Council that is specifically for the cemetery. So we're trying to do a little bit more investigating into that and what that could potentially be utilised for as well. So we'll include that in Councillor Price's minor matter and actions to follow up from this meeting. But yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I just add something? Sorry. It might be worth talking to our community development funding manager, who has access to all the, knows what all the different packages of funds are. That's Roger Morrison or Margot Wilson. Okay. They're very helpful in terms of knowing where all the funding opportunities are throughout the region.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean,
we can include that with this whole piece of work that we'll do, which we'll feed back to Irene with various avenues that you could explore.
Yeah.
Oh, look, thank you very much. I think it'd be a really good project, and having been an ex Valley resident, now living in West Shore, the valley still has got lots of potential, and I only just put in the stormwater function. I don't think I'll get that, but you know, I've been there for 20 years, and we do get surface flooding, and in every 10 or so years you get a fairly major downpour. So I'd love to see that happen. I don't know if it's possible, but a little bit of that would help, and it would also protect those graves a little bit. But thank you very much. And if once you've kind of made your decisions, I know that in our group, which there's only kind of 8 of us, but we are pretty effective. On our team is a guy called Mark Mitchell, who's biodiversity manager for Hawke's Bay Regional Council. He's looked at it and he reckons it's a crappy, weedy place, but it's absolutely a fantastic idea. He's very much behind it, so I'm sure we could get it done. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you,
Thanks for
Irene.
your time and hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. So announcements by myself. Firstly, I would just like to say, of course, it is Anzac Day tomorrow, one of the most important days in our national history. And there's a number of services, community services available. There's the 6 a.m. service at the Soundshell and the 6 a.m. service at Lone Pine Cemetery in Taradale. That's followed by the 9 a.m. service at the Taradale Town Clock, and then lastly the 11 a.m. service, which is actually going to be held this year here at our very own Napier War Memorial. So would love to see people come along to one or several of those if they have the time. Also, immediately following the dawn service at the Soundshell, we are having a rededication of the Napier Swimming Club plaque, which is located at Ocean Spa. So this plaque has been reinstated, and it honours the 148 swimming club members who served in World War I. So that's an extra special rededication that we will be having tomorrow morning. So would love to see people there. Also, I just want to remind people that we are currently seeking nominations for our Citizen Civic Awards. The deadline for that is Monday the 5th of May, and you can find the information on how to nominate people on our website. We'd love to see lots of nominations for that. And last but certainly not least, I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Councillor Tariha. Hope you have a lovely day. And we'll be doing something special with your whānau later on. So.
Thank you.
Now, minor matters, we've had Councillor Price foreshadow. Perfect. Thank you, Carolyn. And that is it from me. Any announcements by management?
Nothing from me, thank you.
We have no minutes to confirm, so we'll jump into our agenda items. And first up, we have the overview of the Hawke's Bay Draft Regional Public Transport Plan. And we've got Kate, Bryce and Russell here to present to this today. So welcome to you all.
Hopefully that works. Do you want to do a little intro?
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Myself and Bryce Cullen and Russell also here to give you an overview of the Hawke's Bay Draft Regional Public Transport for 25-35. And the purpose of this report and the presentation that we're about to show you is to give this overview, show the evolving vision on the proposed network configuration and the direction of the future service improvements. So this report is for information only. Bryce.
Thanks, Kate, and morning, councillors. Big thank you to Kate and the team for getting us on the agenda today and the opportunity to get in front of this council and discuss the public transport network. So I'm Bryce Cullen, I'm the Senior Advisor for Transport Strategy and Policy at the Regional Council. I guess the big ticket things on my desk for context are the development of this plan and also the development of the Regional Land Transport Plan, which is the primary investment vehicle for all transport system investments. And I'll just let Russell introduce himself.
Yes, good morning, Mayor. Good morning, councillors. Russell Turnbull. I'm the Transport Manager for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council.
Right, so into it. So just sort of providing a bit of context, and then we'll go backwards before we can go forwards. I'll I guess, provide a bit of an overview of the planned changes to the network, and then pass over to Russell to talk to some of the proposed changes to total mobility, and some of the other things that we've got in the works that this council may be interested in. So regional public transport plans are a legislative responsibility under the Land Transport Management Act. The Regional Transport Committee, made up of reps from road controlling authorities, so in this case that's Councillor Price as the Napier rep, they have the responsibility to develop, consult on and recommend for adoption regional public transport plans and regional land transport plans. The committee is also made up with a range of advisory reps, AA, Police, Te Whatuora and the like. The public transport services overall, when we think about those, we generally think about the buses. They run between Napier and Hastings. Under that wider public transport umbrella, there's also the Total Mobility Scheme, which is a subsidised transport service for people with permanent disabilities. The funding, importantly, the funding for the service itself comes from a blend of regional council investment and NZTA investment via the National Land Transport Fund. The split for that is 51% NZTA and 49% regional council targeted rate. The funding for the supporting infrastructure comes via a blend of NZTA investment and local council rates as well. So the primary driver for that is that the local council is the road controlling authority, being the asset owner, therefore it is their investment to make on their asset to then support the overall service. So in 2022, the Regional Council went out with a pretty significant change proposal for public transport services across Napier and Hastings. We said, again, sort of at a reasonably high level, we said that we wanted to move away from the current system we have, which we call a coverage service. So if you're familiar with the current network, you'll know that we have reasonably slow meandering loops, very limited connection between routes, pretty long travel times, and as a general observation, a reasonably inefficient network. And we said we wanted to move to what we call a patronage service, so much more direct routes, a lot more crossover points between those routes, and importantly, buses travelling in both directions each way across all routes. We also said in 2022 that when we implement this, we want to have increased frequency, and we'll have a little bit of a snapshot of what that might look like on the next slide. And we said we wanted to extend the operating hours out to, I believe, 9 p.m. in the first instance, extending out to about midnight by 2030. And we said we were going to do all of this from mid-2025. What's currently almost May 2025, and probably as no surprise to this council, there simply is not the money to do that. Obviously, the cyclone has placed pretty massive pressure on all council budgets. Of course, we've also had a change in central government that has led to a change in transport policy, and that's naturally flowed through to a change in activities that are funded from a transport system investment perspective, and also the levels to which they are funded. So as a general comment, centralised public transport funding is down across the board, not just a Hawke's Bay problem, it's a national problem. And so we're in a situation now where we're trying to figure out what we can do in the funding envelope that we do have for the next few years until the next National Land Transport Plan period, which is 2027 to 2030. So this is the network that we went out with in 2022. This is obviously very stylised, but if you've got quick eyes, you'll see on the right there in the legend, we've left in what are now aspirational frequencies and operating hours. And I do have to stress, that is still very much our intention and our aspiration. It's just going to take a lot longer to get there than what we initially thought. So what we think we can do, all going well, and the all going well is us being able to make a service work within our existing funding envelope and ensure that there is some form of supporting infrastructure that can be enabled in the short term. We think we can implement this from about January next year. Just as a sort of a cursory look or general observations of the network, you'll see that there are a lot more crossover points than what there previously were. The hospital, for example, is now serviced by 3 routes. We're planning to service the sports park. Importantly, we're planning to service the airport, which is a first for Hawke's Bay, which will be great. You can also see there that we're planning to service Whakatū, for example. The planned routes from a Napier perspective do present a fair bit of change for the likes of Maraenui, Taradale and Tamatea to a point, but again, with the levels of crossover points and integration between routes, by virtue of doing that, we naturally increase the access, and that will get better in future years as we can secure more sustainable funding and increase that frequency. So really, what does all of this mean? Well, I mean, we've certainly touched on it. It means that we won't be able to do what we thought we could do, but we think we can do something. So again, what we think we can do is implement that network from January next year. It will likely be at our current levels of service, so the trunk route going every 20 minutes in peak, and other routes will vary depending on the current frequency and so forth. But what it has given us is it's given us a bit of time, and with that time, we intend to have as many conversations as we possibly can with users, communities, key stakeholders and investment partners to make sure that the network is right, that the routes are right, and that it's actually going to serve users and communities in the way that we think it will. So some of the questions that we have that we're asking people to think about is, do the planned routes work for you and your community? Are all of the key destinations served, or have we forgotten something? What would make the service more appealing, or what would make you use it more? It would really try to get out tease out some of those qualitative elements, because we are very aware that the service has somewhat of a perception problem, along with a range of other challenges over the years. What would make your journey easier or more attractive? Again, there, really getting towards some of that qualitative stuff, but aiming to then build that into a longer-term service delivery and infrastructure delivery pipeline in conjunction with yourselves and Hastings District, respectively. And importantly, have we missed anything? Bit of a broad brush one, but we don't know what we don't know. And if no one tells us, then we'll just keep not knowing it. So in terms of the public consultation portion of this, we are wrapping it together with the Regional Council annual plan consultation, so that is due to close next Friday, 2nd of May. And Russell will talk through a few more of the finer details of that, the total mobility and a few of the questions we're asking. But importantly for this council, what we've done in the legislative requirement part of the plan is we're required to have what's called a significance policy, and I'm sure you have a council one as well. The significance policy in this context sets the threshold for consultation specifically on the public transport plan. Now, we've massaged that a bit to give ourselves as staff the ability to continue having conversations with users and communities and key stakeholder groups up until about August this year in order to really confirm or iron out and confirm where the routes are going before we implement them. It's far easier and more efficient to do that now than to try and vary anything after we implement. And the reality is that as soon as we implement this network, we're probably going to be stuck with it for quite a period of time. So we have a pretty strong appetite to make sure it is right in the first instance, and then we can ratchet up the levels of service from there. So look, I'll just stop there and pass over to Russell to talk about a few of the other bits and bobs of the plan.
Thank you, Bryce. So the other parts of the plan we're interested in getting feedback on is total mobility. So the buses are obviously a very obvious and clear demonstration of where the Regional Council is providing service across Napier and Hastings. But what is a little invisible, but actually takes up about a third of our budget, is the total mobility service. That's the discounted taxis and companion services for people who can't otherwise use public transport or don't have access or can't use a car, typically through a disability. Now, the reason we're asking some questions about this is that the amount of funding required for total mobility is exploding. And the reason for that is there is a central government mandate that they receive a 75% discount for their taxis and companion services, and for a lot of you, what that means is the driving with Stacey. So it's basically given people a lot of impetus to use the service more. And of course we have a population which is ageing, and that's increasing the demand. But what has happened is that we haven't had the kind of controls we really need to make sure that all the providers operate fairly amongst themselves. So we're actually putting some questions out through our public consultation around doing some maximum fare levies, etc., for what can be charged, etc. So detail of that is in the plan. So we're going to leave a few of these consultation brochures on the corner of the table. But for the plan, we have for the public ability to download and look at the plan, and then a QR code to go to the submission process. Submission process is part of the Regional Council's annual plan. We've put the two things together for efficiency's sake. And we really sort of encourage everyone to have a look at that. As Bryce said, we're going out far and wide, and we have been consulting the disabled community, the operators who provide the services very, very closely to make sure that we understand needs and give them the opportunity to understand what we need to do to try and manage our budgets.
Perfect. Right. Sorry, I just had a little brain blank moment there. The one other thing that we are asking throughout the consultation is at some point, maybe this time next year, sort of to be confirmed, we will be implementing the national ticketing system. So that's being trialled in a range of cities at the moment. That is going to effectively replace the B card with what's called a Motu Move card. As part of that national ticketing system, you'll be able to pay through a range of different mechanisms. So the card itself, credit card, debit card, Apple Pay, you know, your watch, your phone, if you're that flash. I certainly am not, but anyway. But we're taking that also as a moment in time to ask the question around cash as a form of payment on the services. We certainly don't have a preferred option around that. On the one hand, we know that there's a portion of our communities that use the service who rely on cash as a payment option, and so if we took that away, would we preclude them from potentially one of their most reliable transport sources? On the other hand, there is a health and safety element to that. Cash tin robberies, of course, we don't have too many in Hawke's Bay, but there have been some. And also it can slow the service down a little bit with the driver having to handle cash and issue a ticket and so forth. So we really want to hear a community voice on that particular question. But those two matters, the total mobility and the question of cash as a form of payment, we really need to collect that information during that formal consultation period, which again finishes on the 2nd of May, so next Friday. But conversations around the final location of the routes can continue up until August.
Bryce, I'd just like to add one final point. Just on the consultation of routes, we've got some very cool software that we're letting people have a look at. The actual QR codes on this side here, what it does is it takes people into a interactive map of the proposed bus network, and it's to scale, so you can zoom right into your local street. And what we're looking for people to do is actually drop a pin on anything that they consider significant. For instance, make sure you put a bus stop here, or you should be on the street over, or you're taking a bus away from where I currently am. So we're gathering all that information, and by far it's been the most popular way to get submissions to us. So, and I'd also just like to point out just to councillors that we are proposing that the service goes to Bayview. It's just not shown on the map in front of you, but we will continue to service that area. So I'd encourage councillors to have a scan of the QR code, go in and have a look, and see how it works, because we've been getting a significant number of submissions coming through that way.
Excellent, thank you very much. Questions, Councillor Price?
I'll just bring up my Hardy, that would get you to explain where My Way sits. It's still in our plan, I think, but I see it as quite an integral part of what we're doing. So if you can just give us a rundown on that, please.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when we do implement this network, it will replace the current My Way service in Hastings. The Napier trial has been, for all intents and purposes, on hold for quite a period of time, some 12 to 18 months, due to some pre-existing funding challenges around that. In terms of the future of My Way, and I guess just as a bit of a snapshot of the trial review for this council, from a patronage perspective, it was pretty good, performed pretty well. So that trial replaced 3 fixed route services in the Hastings urban areas. Between those 3, I think off the top of my head, they carried some 19,000 passengers the year prior. The My Way service in its first year of operation carried some 32,000, I think it is, 32 or 35, one of the two, across that year trial. It is very expensive to run as well, very, very expensive. The per passenger subsidy is significantly more than a fixed route service. However, it has created good independence and access for quite a range of people, particularly those with disabilities and older people as well. Equally, there's a range of technological challenges that we didn't quite anticipate when we launched it. For example, people may not have a smartphone. It's an app-based service, so then they have to call up the customer service desk and sit on there for God only knows how long, waiting for their ride. Those are just a couple of snapshots. So in terms of where this sits in the future, Councillor Price has quite rightly said we have still got that in the plan, and we've actually left the door open for some form of on-demand transport in a couple of places in the plan. So what we've sort of thought, I guess you could say, is that it could serve a range of functions in the future. So it could be a supplement to the total mobility scheme, for example, or it could be almost think of a hub and spoke type model, where the purpose would be to pick you up from where you are and drop you to your nearest bus stop, as opposed to from wherever to wherever as it functions now. Or it potentially could be used for outlying areas such as Bayview, Home Wānatiawanga, for example. That will, of course, depend on attracting increased funding in future National Land Transport Plan cycles, and also being able to support that with the necessary local share via targeted rates. However, it's certainly not off the table. It's firmly on the radar, and importantly, from a central investment perspective, having it on the radar means that it's open for funding should some become available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Look, really pleased to see the addition of Whakatū, the regional park, and especially the airport. That's a question I do get asked by visitors and locals. You know, there's no bus service to the airport, so great that that's part of what's being proposed and consulted on. You mentioned that there is also going to be a higher level of service being provided to the Hawke's Bay Hospital, and particularly for Napier residents, with that being quite a journey for those of our residents who don't have the ability to get them there themselves. Could you just talk through what that proposed change looks like compared to the current level of service specifically for the Napier community?
Yeah, sure. So when, I guess in the short term, and I would encourage this council, when we say short term, to think for the next probably 18 months. So as I sort of briefly touched on, the next National Land Transport Plan is 2027 to 2030. That's when we have that opportunity to secure that additional funding. Consequently, that's also next LTP time as well. So that's when we have the opportunity to sell it to both NZTA and to our ratepayers to increase the levels of service. And when we say that, we mean the frequency and the operating hours. So in terms of the hospital, it will be served by more routes. Right now, there is just one route going past it, but those are mainly Hastings urban routes. However, that will be a much more efficient trip for Napier residents to the hospital on that trunk route, because it's a whole lot more direct, goes straight through Sports Park, Percival Road, and cuts through Frimley, and thank you very much, you're right at the hospital. And again, with that bi-directional model that we're going to be implementing, you don't have to wait for the bus to do a big circuit around Hastings and come back and pick you up on the same side of the road that the hospital happens to be on. Obviously, the infrastructure requirements there are something we're working through with Hastings to enable safe crossing and so forth. But the planned level of service at the moment on that trunk route will likely be, and I say likely with a big asterisk, because again, we've got to work through what we can do in our funding envelope, but it will likely be 20 minutes at peak times, and I think 30 minutes off peak.
Yes.
On that trunk service. More than likely, that trunk service will be one of the first cabs off the rank for increased frequency as we can secure additional funding.
Thank you for that clarification, really useful. Councillor Crystal.
Yes, just through the Mayor, is there any thought to reducing the size of the buses and things like that to make them more efficient? And
Sure, I can explain that. So we obviously maximise the opportunity size of the fleet, and so in the morning around 8 o'clock and again around 3:30, those buses are full, and they're full of commuters, they're full of students going to school. And yes, they can appear empty or with few passengers during the middle of the day, but there's no economics in parking up a fleet of big buses and having a fleet of smaller buses on the side ready to go. What we do is make sure that the operator puts the right size buses on the right size route, and obviously on the weekends when there's less demand, they do operate the smaller buses that they have in the fleet, and they go down to like 30 seats. But here we don't have there's no economics in having a mixed size fleet that you park on the road during the middle of the day.
And just if I may just expand on that, it's sort of a bit of a sideline to it, but is related. So when we go out for procurement for our upcoming contract, which I think will be going out possibly later this year, early next year, can't quite remember. But part of that is that any new buses from June this year, as mandated by government and certainly has not changed, must be what's called RUB compliant, so requirements for urban buses, and that sets out that they must be zero tailpipe emissions. So, of course, that will likely be up to the operator as to what that fleet looks like, but that is also another opportunity to A, get a more modern fleet, but B, ensure that the fleet is right-sized for our network and for our future aspirations as well.
Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Bogue.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Just a question around patronage. Obviously, it's a how long is a piece of string sort of equation, but at peak hour, or peak times of the day, what's the level of patronage versus the level of seats available?
So I can explain that in perhaps in something that's really relevant. So through March, at around 3:30 in the afternoon, through, for instance, Taradale, we were leaving people behind. Buses were full at that point. Now and we have the same issue in Havelock North. We have full buses at that point. So that's the real crush point in the morning. We obviously have extra buses we put on at that time, so it's only another 5 or 10 minutes for the person to wait for the next bus. But just to give you an idea, at that time, those buses are full.
Excellent, thank you.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. Some of my questions have already been answered, but putting on my grey power hat, the criteria for accessing total mobility, is this a nationwide set of criteria or is it set locally?
No, it's definitely a nationwide set of criteria. So we have up to about 9 or 10 assessment agencies across Hawke's Bay, everything from aged concern right through to CCS. They have trained assessors, and sometimes they go to their homes, sometimes their clients come in, and yes, they have to assess everyone to a national standard.
Right, thank you. Another question, if that's okay. The free bus rides for pensioners from 9 to 3, is that being challenged in any way? And do you pay for it or is it central government?
No, central government pays for it, and so we make a claim every month for the number of people who have presented a Super Gold card between 9 and 3, and any time after 6. Well, there isn't a service after 6 at the moment, and on the weekend.
Right, and just finally, if I may, Hato Hone has a free pickup service in a van for people, I think, going to the hospital, is it? I'm not sure. How does that fit in with what you're doing? Do you fund it, or is that part of your service?
Great question, actually. I was hoping someone might touch on this, and I won't labour the point too much, I promise. So that particular service that you describe falls under the community transport umbrella. I'm not quite sure where Hato Hone secure their funding from. I would imagine it's probably a bit of a spider's web of different funding streams that they managed to stitch together. But in the plan, we do talk about community transport. We have a suite of policies around community transport. And fundamentally, what community transport is by the community for the community within the community. So it's there to provide a solution where there isn't one and where there is clear demand for one. And it can be for any purpose or a variety of purposes throughout the day. So it could be a health shuttle. It could be to get kids to sports parks, for example. It could be a shopping service, insert your idea here, really. Both the benefit and the challenge with community transport, by and large, is that it's volunteer run. That way you avoid having to get passenger endorsements and significant insurances and so forth. That certainly makes it cheaper, but finding a good pool of volunteers is somewhat challenging. Now, what we have done in the draft plan is, I guess you could say, left an invitation open for the council in the next LTP to consider a general rate for community transport, and that would then give us a foundational pool of funding, and we could start looking at a range of initiatives, and that would, of course, unlock potential initiatives in the likes of Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay as well. That also strengthens our position to then go and have conversations with other potential funders to see if they would also be willing to top up the pot.
And just finally, if I may, Madam Mayor, you did talk about the new buses procurement and having less zero tailpipe emissions. Does that mean electric buses? Are you looking at electric buses?
Yes, I can answer that. So just for councillors' information, the current contract with GoBus was to expire in August, but with various national changes in how we procure things, that was extended for 2 years. Following that, and if we would follow to the same pattern as other cities, we would find that a bus contractor would put forward a fleet of battery electric buses. But we don't specify that, we just say zero emission at the tailpipe. So it could be hydrogen if that became available at the time.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of my questions have been answered too, especially was interested around those occupancy and rates, and recognising the fact that it probably is quite time specific as well throughout the day, that demand being set probably by after school and stuff. My question is around the recommendation that will come out of the consultation, especially around the planned routes, and noting that that doesn't finish, I think, until August, you said, or open until August? So will the recommendation that comes through and the data that's provided to the decision makers include the criteria weight and maybe perhaps an associated weighting around the response you're getting from the lower socioeconomic communities? Yeah.
Yes. Basically, to answer it very succinctly, yes, it will. If we look at the likes of Flaxmere community, for example, right now today they have one route that services that community. It goes in, I think, Henderson Road, does a big loop around and comes back out. What we're planning at this point in time is to service that community with two routes in replacement of the one. But we look at those and we go, are those routes in the right place? Do they service the community needs? Flaxmere is one of our highest patronage areas across the service and across time. So that says to us that they're great supporters of the service, and to an extent a range of people will rely on it. So therefore there is a need to make sure that we capture as much community voice and input as we can to make sure those routes are right. So it will be to an extent very community specific, or very somewhat user group specific. And I must stress, when we talk about user groups, if we look at the disabled users as a broad group, of course they do have a range of different needs across the spectrum, but that particular engagement is going to be longer term in nature, because what we want to do is with them build a really good picture of what good looks like, of good service delivery, of good integration with technology and information availability, good infrastructure, so then we can get that in subsequent LTPs and regional land transport plans and just invest over time to enable a really good integrated network.
One further question from me. Last year we were advised that there was going to be a reduction in some of the school routes that were funded by, I think, MOE have historically funded those. Acknowledging a number of those were rural and would never fall within your catchment, but it also impacted Bayview and Clive. Is there anything within your proposals to actually, I guess, meet any increase in demand for our school travellers in relation to that decrease in service from the MOE?
Yes and no. So just to be clear for this council, the Regional Council has always been firm on the position that it is not in the business of school buses, and it never has been in the business of school buses. Equally, where there are school children using the bus on an existing route, on an existing timetabled service, and we start to see a significant increase in demand and don't have the current capacity to meet it, we need to be able to provide extra capacity for those runs. So yes and no. In the instance of Bayview in particular, that you'll see, going back to the plan network map, and one of the finer details that we didn't point out is the route that will be servicing the airport. Every second trip will extend out to Bayview. We have historically serviced Bayview for quite a period of time, but the patronage has been pretty low, really. But in that particular instance, because we're only going out there every second time, that gives us a real opportunity to make sure those times line up with school requirements and getting kids into Napier and to school. So there's a few instances where we will be able to certainly do that, and quite easily, and there'll be another few instances that will take a bit of time to work through.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess that's what I was seeking, some confidence around whether your existing routes would, A, be appropriate at the moment, and then if it proves that the demand does increase significantly, if you'd have the flexibility to look at how to manage that increase in demand. So I appreciate that. Councillor Crystal.
Yeah, just through the mayor, just a question about pricing. Having been in London a few months ago, they have a maximum per day that they on their card. So when you get to £10 bump, you don't get charged anymore. Are these new cards and stuff? Will they have that ability to do that sort of thing here in New Zealand?
Yes, absolutely. There's a significant amount of flexibility to do all of that. So maximum daily fares, maximum weekly fares, maximum monthly fares. We're keeping things basic at the moment because we're still 12 months away from when the new national ticketing system is likely to come in. But we'll explore some of that functionality, that exciting opportunity, a little bit closer to the time.
Great. Okay. Some great questions and really, really good update. Thank you for coming to speak to us today. Could I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mawson and Councillor Price. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, just through the mayor, I just want to commend Bryce, you and Russell and your team. I'm council portfolio holder for accessibility, and I've seen you no less than sort of 3 or 4 times at the Napier Disability Awareness Group, and you just commend you and your team on your engagement with stakeholders, and yeah, fantastic work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Yes, well done and a great presentation. Being on the committee, I've seen how much work you've done to get to this point. I think it's quite exciting, the fact that commuters from Napier will be able to get to the hospital easier, and in another couple of years' time even more regular. And as I say, I love my ways being kept in the loop because I think it makes it work even more, or something similar that gets, and I think Councillor Bogue might have sort of touched on that, getting people to the bus stops a little bit easier. So no, well done, and all I say is people to get out and put their views across if there's something that they don't like, because you can't do anything unless you're told about it. So no, well done, thank you.
Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Moving on to our second agenda item, the Unison Easement 104 Latham Street Reserve, and I invite Anoop up to present the report to us, please. Welcome, Anoop.
Good morning, everyone. I present this paper as read. It's a request to relocate existing Unison cable in 104 Latham Street, where we are planning for replacement of wastewater flume. The paper seeks approval from the council under Section 48 of Reserves Act 1977. This relocation and easement will not make any material changes or purpose of the reserve. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Open up for any questions. I think this is fairly straightforward. Unison will be doing the work, we're paying for it.
Happy to move.
Councillor Simpson, happy to move. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mawson, would you like to speak to that?
Oh, it just appears to be an essential piece of work for health and safety reasons, so let's get on with it.
Yep, great.
Nothing further.
Any other speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Anoop.
Thank you.
Next, I welcome Luke up for the animal control fees and charges 25-26. Welcome, Luke.
Kia ora. The purpose of this report is to have you consider the amended animal control fees for the 25-26 year, outside obviously of the annual plan program, and consultation due to the need to advertise these fee changes to dog owners for the purpose of satisfying the requirements of the Act. So the fees and charges have been changed generally by about 4% across the board. Where reasonable, we've tried to keep them consistent with Hastings District Council, just so that there isn't a vast difference between the two areas. The draft fees and charges have been attached to that report for you to consider, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
open up for any questions. Councillor Price.
Just CPI, is it going up 4% this next term?
Through the chair, I'm unsure what CPI is for this year, I'm sorry. Oh, actually, yeah, sorry, 4.1%.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you for that. Have you got any idea of what proportion of dogs out there are unregistered? Any idea, or is it just a ballpark figure or approximately?
Through the chair, it's not data that I have in front of me,
No.
I'm sorry. I can get that and send it through to you.
And what happens if people don't pay and their dog is unregistered? Then what happens to it?
Through the chair, so there's a process that the animal control team follow. They go out and they sort of actively monitor that, the unregistered dogs. We do encourage people to pay before the due date. Otherwise, there is a late fee payment, which is included in those draft fees and charges. So they are given an opportunity to pay late as well, but there is an additional fee.
Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, if I can just extend the question of Councillor Price and just confirm or seek confirmation, is the driving factor for the changes cost recovery, the CPI, or matching Hastings District Council?
Through the chair, it's cost recovery.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No. Can I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Councillor McGrath, would you like to speak to that?
Oh, it's just a process. It's going for public consultation. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Is this going to public consultation, or are we making the decision now so they can get it out for July?
I actually don't know that it does go out. Does
No,
it go
that's
out for
why it's
public
here now, I think.
consultation, Mike?
No,
No, it doesn't,
no,
does it?
no. Sorry, I thought
No.
it was.
Just through the chair, yeah, if I'm going to speak to this, it's just, I've seen the work that the team do down there. It's hard work. Like I said in the past, it's not a lot of white fluffy dogs that they're dealing with, trying situations, and yeah, absolutely a lot of respect for what you and your team do, Luke.
Any other speakers? Councillor Crystal.
Just through the chair, just to put it out there, if you want to save money, go and do the responsible dog owner. It's quite simple to do, and you actually save yourself about $42 in doing that. So just put that out there to dog owners, because a lot of people don't really know that exists.
Very good point, Councillor Crystal. If there's no further speakers, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Fabulous. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 4, appointments to the 3-year Partnership Fund Committee. I welcome Margot. Good morning.
Good morning. Before I start, please note that there is actually a date error in the paper. I was obviously very excited to get through to 2026, and I wrote 2025.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, you probably are too. Last year you will remember that we undertook a comprehensive review of council funding, the way that council funds community organisations. This paper is presented to approve the membership of the council committee who will assess the 3-year funding partnership fund. The committee, following the assessments that they do, the committee will make recommendations to council on who will be funded through that fund for a 3-year period. Yeah, so it's pretty straightforward, I think.
Thank you. Yes, it is fairly straightforward. I will just check that there's no questions.
Just a question. Thank you,
Councillor
Madam
Bogue.
Mayor. The people who are appointed for the next triennium, starting from the end of the financial year this year, will they, assuming they're re-elected at the end of that triennium, will they automatically roll over, or will that be a mayoral appointment?
Will be a mayoral appointment.
Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. It's a question for you, Madam Mayor. I see that the chairperson is appointed by the mayor, and so for this period now, before the next election, have you appointed from the 4 councillors?
Yes, Councillor Crown.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, can I have Councillor Simpson?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I'm a member of the committee and we have discussed, so I just want clarification from you. Future appointments won't wait till the next funding round. I assume appointments will be made in the new triennium to ensure that there's monitoring and observations of the...
That's correct. That will be part of the beginning of the triennium committee appointments.
Thank you.
Okay, could I have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Mawson. Councillor Bogue, would you like to speak to that?
I'll just say it looks like there's some good competence on that, so yeah.
Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you, Margot. Next up, invite Richard to present the proposed district plan variation for Parklands. Welcome, Richard.
Through the Mayor. This agenda item is seeking endorsement of, or to proceed with a plan change or and a variation to enable more residential development in the Parklands area, and it is requiring endorsement because we've done preliminary investigations into into what we think is a good proposal. And it requires, I guess, some endorsement from the council so that we can proceed to full investigation of and develop a plan change with all the kind of the usual investigations that you would expect around traffic and the concerns of residents and parks and reserves and all those sorts of things. So the idea really is that on the back of council's intention to be financially focused with its commercial assets, council's setting up the CCTO, hopefully in July, to further these initial investigations that we've done on the asset and take the plan change over if it is endorsed by council today. And in terms of what the plan change is about, it's really to optimise the residential yield and increase the housing supply to maximise financial returns to the council. It does not mean that we're going to squeeze a whole lot more in and lessen the amenity in Parklands. What I have learnt in my time of managing Parklands for financial return is based on having the best price you can get for a residential section, which means your value proposition has to be really good, and it is good in Parklands. You want to maintain that optimal amenity connection to Park Island, good section sizes, all those sorts of things. So it's very much about maximising the overall area to provide even more amenity possibly than what is currently there for the Parklands residents. The key basis is, to optimise the residential yield, have a look at the stormwater management approach. A key part of Parklands in terms of its value proposition is that it does have it has resilience against flooding and inundation, and there are some issues there that we would like to kind of resolve through the plan change as well, in terms of a better approach to some of some of the impacts, I guess, from events. And then we also believe that the current configuration of the swales and reserve areas into the the main reserve event, which is Park Island itself, can be so much better with good connections and with the right sort of development facing the reserve. So there is some potentially really good things that can come out of reconfiguring some of that through a plan change. And lastly, also thinking about providing a a sort of a neighbourhood commercial centre as well. So that's something that if you familiar with Parklands is quite. It's kind of got to the Tamatea Pack and Save as its kind of closest amenity, really, in terms of commercial areas. So we're thinking about that too. What would be a great kind of commercial space inside there as well, and how can we make that work? There is a little a map associated with that that you can see. That has the proposed areas of where we would be looking at changing the plan. It's very high level at this stage, and as I said before, this is really endorsement to do the full investigations and to prepare a quality plan change going forward. And then there is also a sort of a financial feasibility or projection, I guess, some information attached on that, which is, as I say, the main driver behind what we're bringing to you today for endorsement. Happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Richard. And just noting that the initial analysis is indicating a profit of between 10.8 and 14.9 million from the additional sections that will be available to sell. So obviously the whole goal is around offsetting rates via the CCTO mechanism, so we're certainly keen to explore these opportunities when they become available to us, so thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you very much, Richard, for the paper and for the attached information. That was really helpful. I do have a couple of questions that I hope you can help me with. So I was looking through to try and pull out how much you think the plan change will cost. So I see you've got a line in there around council fees of 3.7. Is that related to the development, so consenting? What is the number that you're expecting the actual development of the plan change?
Plan change should probably be around the 100,000.
Okay. And that 100,000, is that the budget for actual expenditure, or does that include in-kind costs from, say, in-house planning team?
No, that would be completely, in terms of the reports that would be done, we would treat it like a private plan change, so they would be costed and paid for.
Fully costed and paid for,
Yeah.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's what I would like to get straight in my head. I wrote down who is the applicant.
Yeah.
So because our CCTO is not yet formed, it is council applying for?
Yeah, it's a good question, and that's I think that's what we're trying to do, is to lay the foundations for the CCTO to take it over. So if we wait for the CCTO to form, it means that our potential approval for a plan change gets delayed by however many months it is for that to happen. And as I was trying to say at the beginning, this is really what I'm after here, is a mechanism for us to have some certainty that we can go the next stage of actually doing the deeper investigations. So in terms of the applicant, it would fall, once the CCTO is formed, the applicant would be the CCTO.
Okay, so...
So we're not applying for one at the moment, we're just council's giving approval because there's no CCTO. In the absence of that, we've got like a good idea that we're saying we'd like to pursue this. Is that okay, council?
Yeah, so do you mind if I explore this a little bit? Because I would like to get it straight in my mind. So Napier City Council does the pre-work in the preparation for lodging a private plan change. The private plan change will be lodged by the CCTO. The work to do that upfront preparatory work will be done, you say, through existing budgets. Whose existing budgets? The CCTO existing budget for
So that would come from the Parklands budget.
Okay. Which currently sits within council but will be part of a transfer over into the CCTO.
Correct.
Thank you. through you, Madam Mayor, just carrying that on, the staff involved will be fully costed and paid for back to that one cost centre?
Yeah.
Yep, that's all wrapped up.
So if I could use an analogy, it's exactly the same as what we would do for a resource consent. So we currently have a resource consent in for stage 12 of Parklands, and Luke and his team will give us a bill for their services, and correspondingly we would be, for preparing the actual resource consent, we would be paying for that as well.
Great, thank you, that makes it clear.
Councillor Crystal. Yes, through the Mayor. One of the things when you look at it at the plan, it's quite close to the drain and also at one end very close to the typo. So I know you've talked a bit about the resilience, but that and stormwater, it's very important because I know that area gets quite wet. Walk the dog very close to there. So how do you see that playing out?
So the typo is not, the way that the hydraulics work is that the typo's at capacity. So we actually have to take the stormwater away from the typo. That's when my knowledge goes to the engineering part of it. So they engineer this so that the water falls away from the typo. How close they get to it is kind of irrelevant. It's which way it falls. That's the best I can say. Yeah, and so they've organised, we have got a level of, I guess, there's been, the numbers have been crunched around how that works and how that all goes through, and that is checked off by council via Simon and his team and Russell's team. But yeah, essentially the typo's at capacity, so everything has to drain the other way. Yeah.
Further to that, but when the typo floods, some of that area floods. So how is that going to be mitigated? Is that just by raising it up?
So we have already been talking to the regional council about that. That's actually under their jurisdiction. And we have pointed out that there are some issues in that, where it adjoins Prebinson, and they have acknowledged that, and we're developing resilience for that, flood banks, things like that. It's also worth noting that the spillway into, there is actually like a ford across Prebinson Drive. There's a low point that under, really bad circumstances, the water actually doesn't go through the typo, it goes at a low point in Prebinson Drive and crosses over into Lagoon Farm.
Councillor Bogue, then Councillor Crown.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. It was good to hear mention of possible retail in this expanded Parklands, which is great. I don't really see it in the report, but I guess it's the potentially provide for a neighbourhood centre. Does that mean, is that a referral to possible shops or a shop? Okay, no, I think that's a really good addition. Thank you.
Just a supplementary question from myself with regards to that. Has there been any initial, and it may be far too early, but conversations with commercial operators that may be interested in leasing space within the...
Yeah, we've got the feelers out with Foursquare and the like, yeah. And there is some interest, yeah.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through the chair. Leading on from the line of questioning from Deputy Mayor Brosnan, I'm wanting to understand a little bit more, get comment from you around the engagement or stakeholder engagement responsibilities throughout the process, since there is that interaction between council, CCTO, and I'm assuming the policy settings around that will be a little bit different for each entity. So how will we ensure that stakeholders are engaged with properly throughout the process, and where are the checks and balances from our perspective?
So initially, in terms of the formation of the plan change, would be sort of the responsibility of the applicant. And so that would be, at the moment, we would be doing that in-house, but essentially that would be the CCTO. In terms of I guess it's prior to it being formally lodged. So once it's formally lodged, it goes through the statutory process of a plan change, exactly what you're doing with the district plan at the moment, and you have to go through the submission process and all those sorts of things. But that is not sufficient really for the way we would be doing that. So the best way to think of it is that we would be doing our consultation leading into it, and then there is the formal statutory 20 days, all this sort of stuff that happens afterwards that becomes once the actual plan change is lodged.
Councillor McGrath.
Yes, through the Mayor. The interaction between, I guess, as we get closer to the park and the reserves and the sports grounds, just thinking about the interaction and how close you're looking at getting if you've got rugby balls getting kicked over fences. Are we getting that close? And I guess further around where the path goes behind the hill is a dog off leash area. Are we looking to encroach into any of there or have issues with dogs running onto properties, or what sort of thinking's being put in there, and have our parks team had any involvement up until now?
So I think it's really important to remember that we're at a preliminary stage, and a lot of these investigations in detail have to come through. But we have, yes, have had discussions with parks. They're still ongoing in terms of how that works. One of the key things to think about there is, if you can visualise Park Island, there are some power lines that cross over behind the Unison substation. They're a major impediment in terms of development of the rugby fields and whatnot going forward. So part of this proposal is working with parks and reserves to see what they can feasibly use and what they can't, and we have the potential to use some of that land, particularly on the other side of the power lines, for residential purposes. But that still needs to be worked through in its finality with parks and reserves, because it has to be in line with their plans for rugby and stuff like that as well. So, but in terms of the distances from that, it's quite substantial, Councillor McGrath, because of those power lines, basically, you've got quite a big distance between the two. They're not really joined at all. And then on the other side, in terms of the dogs, and there is a swale in between there, and that needs to be a little bit further developed as well between Park Island and the and Parklands. So that runs along that boundary, which is like a fence, if you like. And what we're proposing is at certain points we would have bridges going into Park Island, but they would be for like formal, like you'd have formal places of crossing as opposed to just willy-nilly crossing the boundary through there.
Yep.
So that would hopefully be able to manage any dogs and things like that as well. It'd be clearly defined where Park Island begins and where Parklands ends.
Thank you.
Supplementary question regarding these power lines. Are these changes an opportunity for us to engage in a conversation with Unison regarding undergrounding those, if that was going to be of benefit?
They are, and we have. It's hard work. It's very, very expensive, and I think what's really important with this is to keep our eye on the dollars. There is definitely cost benefit that is working against undergrounding at this stage. It's just not worth it. So we are thinking of other things. So if you were going to have, say, one of the things we're looking at is a CAF or some sort of someplace, a CAF really, and to do it towards the Park Island and the close to the power lines, where you could still, engage with the sports fields on a Saturday The theory is like we could use some of the area to spill out on an outside basis, a bit like the Clifton Cafe, that sort of style. And then at the same time, it's not as attractive for residential necessarily to be that close to the power lines, but it might be really good commercially for a cafe to have that space, but also to be able to have a catchment that's the sports fields, the dog walkers, and parklands as well, as opposed to having the CAF as part of the 4 square area in the middle of parklands. So there's some really good things that we can sort of tease out to make the most of that opportunity. But in answer to your question, it looks at the moment that it's a bit of a stretch to be able to underground. Financially, it's really hard to do for Unison as well as ourselves. And I think for those, I think in terms of our own budgets with parks and reserves, we do have some monies for that, but they're not enough to cover that. So we're looking at the other way of how can we actually integrate that as best we possibly can and use that area really sensibly, make good commercial decisions on it.
That makes sense. Particularly you've actually done some due diligence around it. Thank you. Councillor Price.
Just a quick question. Further from Councillor Crown, consultation will take place on this change. How wide would the consultation go?
We haven't really identified that, but I think it's fair to say that our main consultation or a big part of it will be with the Parklands residents.
Okay, thank you. And just a comment, I think the power lines, from what Russell might be able to correct me, but the Unison see them as they've got a lot of life left in them.
Yeah.
Their date for change is quite well out, and that doesn't really give them the enthusiasm to do anything. Would that be correct?
That's correct. We do have good dialogue with them over the Parklands, through the Parklands development, and there are some other things. They also have some ambitions for, it's not just status quo in terms of what they're doing with their current substation. So I think we need to keep talking, but at the moment, to be honest, it looks like they're staying, the lines.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I was just ready to propose a new substantive motion, if you were prepared to take one.
No other questions before we... No? Yep.
Thank you, Mayor Wise. Thank you, Richard. I'd like to propose a new motion, just expanding on the conversation that has been had around the table. I've also emailed this to Carolyn, if that is helpful, that Council endorse Council staff to prepare all information to support a private plan change in variation to the remaining stages of Parklands. B, note the funding for the private plan change and preparation work will be covered in full by the Ring Fence Parklands development budget. And C, delegate to the Council CCTO Ahuriri Investments Management, once formed, to apply for the private plan change.
Are there any questions with regards, and I'll get Carolyn to pop it up on the screen in a minute. Before I ask for a seconder, we'll have a peruse of that.
Yes, I have a question, just through you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Does that mean that the plan change will be later, until after the appointment of the CC? No? Yes? What time difference will that make?
What I understood from the question from the officer, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr Minika, was that all of the preparatory work will be done by council staff, and the intention was to enable that now. It wouldn't delay the actual application, which was always intended to be made by the CCTO.
That's correct, yeah.
I think this just provides additional clarity about who is responsible for which stages as we work through the plan change. I think from my perspective, it does clearly outline what the process is and where the funding is coming from and who will be doing what.
Can I just ask another question? As this is replacing really the officer's recommendation, does the officer see any difficulties or problems with this particular amendment?
No, I think that gives added clarity to the steps that we've been discussing.
Cool. If there's no further questions, do I have a seconder for the substantive motion? Councillor Simpson? Hey, Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I think this is a really practical step. We've heard from our community that they want us to be maximising the return on the assets that they own. We know that the future development of the Parklands section is one of the assets that the city owns, and that it is a considerable income source that reduces rates for our city over the years. We also know that we have charged our CCTO, although it is very early stages, obviously, by being in charge of maximising those asset returns. So I think it makes a lot of sense for them to do the work around applying for the private plan change in conjunction with the community that is affected by it. So yeah, support this process and look forward to watching it come into fruition.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, like Deputy Mayor, when I read a comment that says there is no cost to council and council's doing work, I immediately conjure up ideas that there's no such thing as a council doing an activity without there being a cost. So that was a question that I had raised, and I thank the Deputy Mayor for more eloquently asking the question and more accurately defining our motion, because I would have certainly moved similar. So I do support the clarification of where costs shall fall for this thing, as we would treat any other developer or proposer of such a plan change. So I second the motion. Thank you.
Okay, any further speakers? Councillor Taylor.
Just point of order, could we see the motion on the screen, please?
We will pop it back up.
Thank you. Before we vote.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just would like to also endorse the comments of the previous, the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Simpson. Since I've been on council, we have often raised the point of that Parklands has been the jewel in the Napier City crown, and we were always looking for where could we find another investment, and this plan change gives us the opportunity to increase the yield and maximise our return on that piece of land. So in the absence of future investments until the CCTO is in place, this move is one of the ways in which we can reduce the burden on rates. So fully endorse it. Thank you.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers in support of the motion. Are there any who wish to speak against? No, I will therefore put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you, Richard. And we are continuing on with you for the CCTO Tranche 1 Assets Leasehold Land.
Through the Mayor, the purpose of this report is really to keep going on that council direction to diversify the risk and improve the liquidity of our financial assets. Currently, Parklands and the leasehold land make up the bulk of council's financial assets, certainly the Tranche 1 assets for the CCTO, and both are, if you went to a financial advisor, they would say you've got all your eggs in one basket here. So one of the things that we're looking for towards the CCTO doing for us as they go forward is to start diversifying and mitigating some of the risk of having all that land in Napier, but also obviously trying to set ourselves up for ongoing financial return and growing the financial asset. So the leasehold land has had a history of being thought of as the crown jewels. I think we got mentioned that in the last. Councillor Taylor mentioned that with Parklands. So the leasehold land similarly was seen like that. Really, in terms of the leasehold land, in the past, it was seen as we need to hang on to those in that kind of mentality. And I think what Council's done through the establishment or the signalling of the establishment of the CCTO is that actually we want good financial management of our assets, not protection of the individual assets. And essentially that's what this paper is about, is enabling the leasehold land to move in its entirety for management for overall financial performance for the CCTO. To do that, there is a little bit of unbundling in terms of what the previous regimes that we had around managing the leasehold land. And Council has held a workshop to discuss particularly what was thought of as the strategic nature of some of the assets in the leasehold land portfolio, and whether or not it needed to keep those assets out of the CCTO. However, working through the strategic nature of those assets, we have found that the financial performance was not part of the strategic analysis, which means, I guess, that the central element that you are looking for going forward is not part of the previous analysis of why something is strategic. And after working through all of those sites, the natural place for that was that actually the strategic nature of those assets was not strong enough to warrant Council pulling them away from the CCTO to manage, and that they should be able to perform at their maximum, which might include sale into the future and reinvestment into a different portfolio or a different part of the portfolio. So in order to do that, there is we have to approve the entire leasehold land portfolio to come under AIMS management, but also to enable the property portfolio policy to reflect AIMS involvement into the future, which is attached. And with those two mechanisms, they will be able to manage the leasehold land portfolio, including the machinery around sale to the lessees and those sorts of things into the future for overall financial best gain to Council. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. I guess one of the sort of reasons historically for defining a piece of land as strategic is if Council would potentially at some stage in the future like to use that land to build a council facility or meet some council objectives. And that has obviously been analysed as part of this process. So just wondering if you can sort of talk through what the rationale around why our thinking has changed in that space.
I think the analysis originally done was from the basis that the entire leasehold land portfolio was sacrosanct and couldn't be sold. So the first bit of policy work that was done was going, well, what ones are more strategic and what ones are less, because at least then we can liberate the less strategic ones for sale. And the criteria that was used was things around, well, potential reuse for some other, say something that stormwater management or public access, those sorts of things, were given as strategic reasons to hold on to something. What we've found in terms of our analysis is that there are no informal public access ways through those properties that we can identify. They are actually they've all formalised through bike lanes and council paths and those sorts of things. And any of those potentialities that don't actually exist, like a stormwater reserve or whatever, is the right mechanism would be through your proposed district plan and doing a designation on what the right piece of land as to trying to squeeze it into something you happen to own. So it would be a much more you would not worry about who owns it. You would actually work out where is the best place to put this pipe or whatever it was, and then you would go through a designation process and under Public Works purchase that piece of land for that purpose. So in other words, that reasoning was not quite, that wasn't very sound in terms of, yes, it may possibly be useful for that, but you would never go about it under in that way. You would use the district plan to designate for that purpose.
Thank you. And supplementary to that, I guess, a piece of land that already had significant assets on it owned by the lessor, I can't remember which way around it is. In order for council to then do anything, we would have to purchase those assets, and probably at a significant cost anyway, which would
And it might not be
a
for sale.
financially viable proposition.
That's right. So you own the lease, and the lease is actually very, it's a very tight lease. So it hasn't got much wiggle room in terms of what you can and can't do. You have no rights over the capital improvements on it, or being able to buy out the lease. You can't even do that. So it may not be for sale in the first place. So you've got no leverage there at all, really, as opposed to just collecting some rent for the lease.
Thank you. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Our current lessees, what communication have we had with them about this impending change or proposition of AIM managing the property in the long term?
There hasn't been any at this stage, yeah.
So this would, a decision today, whatever that is, would potentially trigger those conversations?
I don't know if there needs to be any conversations about that. Their lease is the lease. They have a contract around the lease. The contract does, to my knowledge, not imply any consultation if the lease tends to change or whatever, and we can notify them of the change, but I wouldn't be asking them for their opinion on it.
Thank you. I think the notification is the point that I'm trying to make, since there may not be a change to the lease, however, who's managing that lease, that change, and so I would think that that would be the polite, prudent thing to do in that situation.
I think that the other way of looking at it is that the CCTO is council's agent. Council still owns it. It's not the ownership of the asset, and that includes Parklands and all of those, stays with council.
Just to clarify, the assets are going to be staying on Napier City Council balance sheet. That is a decision-making delegation to the CCTO, but I think it would be appropriate once the CCTO is formed mechanically and in place that we could do a notification to the leasehold owners. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I guess I'll do the
It's
clarification.
probably appropriate that we will do a notification to those.
Yes.
A supplementary question or perhaps comment to that as well, I think, is that in light of this conversation that we're having in a public forum today, current leaseholders, I think it would be fair for them to assume that it may be more viable or likely that they will be in a position to buy the land than they have historically. So I think we need to ensure that, how we manage that and the ways that we communicate with our leaseholders is really important, because we do know that a number of them for a significant period of time have been interested in buying the land. So I would just, I think perhaps as an action that we put some thought into how we manage the communications and
around that and ensuring that our leaseholders are kept in the loop.
Yeah, certainly clarification around, communication around appointment of directors, chair once those appointments are made, who to communicate with, and the timeframes around when all those appointments are made and who they can communicate with, and changes as they are in place. We'll certainly make some effort to communicate that well.
Yeah, and I think also in terms of some timeframes around, what the process will look like in the future, recognising that we're still working through those details, but what the process for the potential purchase of the land will look like, and even some timeline indications as to when that may be feasible and possible for them to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Any further questions? No, so I'll ask for a mover and seconder. Thank you. I'm happy to move from the chair if I could have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Crown. Just want to acknowledge all the work that has gone into this, Richard and Scott, who I think is with us online, all the staff and elected members. This has been quite a significant, I guess, shift in thinking for us as a council in terms of the way that we view a leasehold land portfolio. And the analysis that has been done clearly demonstrates that by retaining our leasehold land, we're actually not getting the best return on our investment. It's sitting reasonably low. It's incredibly conservative, which as a council, we do have a responsibility to operate in that way. And I guess that underpins one of the reasons why we are proceeding with our Ahuriri Investment Management Company to enable decisions to be made with that commercial focus, which fundamentally at the end of the day is all about reducing rates for our residents. So it's great to take this next milestone, and looking forward to us moving forward with the recruitment process and the establishment of Ahuriri Investment Management. So thank you. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you've covered everything off really well. I guess the only other thing I just wanted to note is I think the paper really outlines well the journey that we've been on as a council, as an organisation, as to how we view what is in our care, basically. And this paper really redefines the purpose of our leasehold land so that it better serves the community. So you're really happy to support the recommendation and to see us move past this next gateway.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Right, we've just got a few more papers on the open agenda, and we've got Steph with us next for the next two, the action points register and amendment to meeting schedule. So welcome, Steph. I invite you if there's any updates on the action points register.
Good morning, everyone. So in Hannah's absence, you have me this morning. I do have a couple of updates to the paper that was circulated, which thank you very much to the infrastructure team for providing the updates, and they relate to items 173 through to 177. And these will be circulated in the minutes, but in relation to 173, the update there is that the work on the toilet block has not started and won't start until the next financial year. And also that Dolbell Reserve volunteers are doing weed control work and planting in the area to allow for additional seating in the area in the future. Number 174, excuse me, the updates to the municipal theatre is the upgrades to the toilets have been completed and ready for use for those that have been on site, and that the ticketing office painting has also been completed at the end of March. Number 175, apparently this was reported to Sustainable Napier on the 10th of April, and that there are no 2020 flooding projects are listed as on hold or not started. 176, again, was presented to the 10th of April Sustainable Napier. The EPMI was currently working on the governance structure for the reserve and reservoir, and 177, again, was an update to the 10th of April on the procurement strategy for the next stages of the reservoir as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Steph. Any further questions? Councillor Price.
I have a couple of questions. First one's 171, and it's the Holt Planetarium. It says that establish of a project group. I was just wondering if Lynn Trafford is going to be on that group. She's the real...
We can follow up on that.
Oh, okay. If we could just follow up on that. And the other one was, and I just lost it, on the 220 flood, there's nothing further to be done, and I was just questioning the Herrick and Terradole Road drainage being made bigger.
That 175, is it?
175, was it?
Yes.
Yeah, just through the chair. I believe the question was about whether there were any 2020 flood event projects were on hold or delayed, and yeah, that was because of, I believe this report was around the outfall procurement strategy, and some of the larger project, we had to move some of the projects around the Three Waters program. So this question was just confirming that none of those projects from the 2020 flood were affected by that reprogramming and reprioritisation work.
I think I might have asked the question, and it's a little bit...
It says here were put on hold or have not, or not started yet.
Yeah, it was because of the resolution to change the funding to facilitate some of the other large works.
Is that your recollection of the question that was asked?
Maybe I'll discuss it further.
Take that offline?
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Steph, I find it a little misleading, 171. And the reason why I find it misleading is that it's under action points and it's described as officers to work with. The chair of that committee, Councillor McGrath, can, I'm sure, confirm this was a resolution that was put and voted on in minor matters, that a paper come to council in detailing certain things. So I'm just trying to understand why it's in the action register to start with versus why a paper is not coming to council, because the progress, completion and the way it's been summarised in the action point summary kind of downgrade it from a resolution of council into sort of a fluffy action where we work together. It was a little different to that.
Can I just intercede, because I wasn't at that meeting?
Yeah.
But if it was a minor matter, we cannot make a resolution in regards to a minor matter normally?
So understanding orders, you can make a resolution under a minor matter, which is to direct council staff to bring a paper, which is what was put and passed.
A resolution?
Correct.
Because that's a decision.
You can put a resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, just to clarify, you may put only one type of resolution in a minor matter, and that is to direct council officers to prepare a report.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, so that's my slight conundrum with this action.
Having not been...
I think we leave it on the action register for now, bearing in mind that we're actually in the process of developing a tracking mechanism for resolutions. But if we could note that this was in fact a council resolution, so that it goes through that proper process.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Any further questions? Could I have a mover and seconder? Don't all leap on me at once. Councillor Crystal and Councillor Bowie. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Now the amendment to the 2025 meeting schedule.
Yes, the next paper is just to adopt the amendment of the calendar for two items. One is the 3-year Partnership Fund Committee, new date set down for the 22nd of May, and for Ngā Mokomoka o Te Iwi meeting for the 4th of July.
All good?
Could I ask a question, please, through you, Madam Mayor? Steph, usually when we get such a suggestion or recommendation, we have an amended schedule in front of us that I don't see attached to the agenda, and it does actually say that if a local authority adopts a schedule of meetings, that the notification or any amendment constitutes a notification of every meeting. So it's saying we should be looking at all the meetings as a whole. I'm not going to, hold voting in favour of this, but would it be possible in the minutes for that new revised schedule of meetings to be included? Thank you.
We can arrange for that.
Yeah, yes, that's fine, we can, yeah. Is there no more questions?
Oh, yeah.
Question, Councillor Brown?
Just out of curiosity, the Ngā Manukinako Te Iwi change, is that so it says new date, is that new time or new date and new time? Okay, may I ask the reason? Yeah. May I ask why? What is the reason for the change?
We can't. No, we can't. We need, sorry, Gemma, if you could come up to the microphone.
When I met with Hilary, she looked at the calendar for the year that would affect the mana whenua representatives on the committee, and there is a manu kororo on the same day, and so that the representatives would likely be attending that with whānau, so she moved the date, requested the date to be removed.
Supplementary question, are we confident, because I'm aware we've got some timelines around some decisions that need to be made that Ngā Manukinako Te Iwi need to provide recommendations prior to the council decision. Is that being considered in pushing out the date for this meeting? Yeah. We'll make an action to have a look at that, because I do know we're under some time pressure for a couple of decisions that from my recollection, we were pushing it even with the 13th of June date, let alone pushing it out 3 weeks. So, yeah, if we can just make an action. So perhaps if we take that out from adopting that now, is that going to create an issue? Subject to, yeah, perfect. Okay. If there's no further questions, could we have a mover and seconder? Councillor Mawson, I think you were indicating earlier. Councillor Taylor, if there's no further comments, we'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Gemma. Okie dokie. Our last official agenda item is the reports under delegated authority, of which we have tenders let and receiving 2 tenders for the wastewater flow meter installation and the wastewater network flow meters. Any questions? No, so could I have a mover and seconder? Thank you to Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Price. Would you like to speak to that?
Great to see Council's continuing investment in core Three Waters work. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Any further speakers? I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. And now we will just go back to the minor matter with regards to SQ Cemetery. And Councillor Price, would you like to?
Okay, I'd just like to move that council consider the public forum from Irene Cahill and direct officers to prepare a council paper to consider opportunities for access, permission, appropriate funding opportunities, and a kind support for spraying and arborist work. Geez, I did a good job there, eh?
So essentially, you are wanting to direct council officers to prepare a paper
Yes.
with regards to the proposition that proposal we received from Irene today.
Caroline's got that. Yeah.
Yeah, what sort of time? And actually, one question of me, why would we do this outside of the annual plan process? Is it that you're concerned that there's not a lot of time for it to be considered as the annual plan and the annual plan process, or
Yeah, I think the fact that a presentation's been made and you can see the work that's gone into it, and it's something that I feel needs to be, we need to assist them in trying to help with the cemetery and the area around it.
Just ask a question of clarification. My understanding from the presentation was that they had made a submission to the Parks and Reserves
Needs to be
policy and then had been referred to a public forum as the best way to raise it. Does that,
Which potentially, in hindsight, it may have been better to redirect her to the annual plan process.
Right.
However, what's done is done.
Yeah.
could I make one further suggestion if Councillor Price agrees? Perhaps the information he is requesting come back to council could come back as deliberations on the annual plan. That could be the time frame.
I think as opposed to it being an independent agenda paper, that would be my preference, that this does come to us via the annual plan deliberations. Yeah.
I think, from my point of view, getting it into the system is the main part.
Yeah, and I think that's the most streamlined way to do it and the most appropriate place for it to be considered.
I have no problem with that.
Yeah, perfect. And from, it won't be a separate,
So we just
Yeah,
got the annual plan there.
So the council officers will prepare all of that information that you asked for and bring it to you in deliberations. So that's when you make your decision rather than a separate paper. That's right.
Yeah. Do you want to just pop that up on the screen and then I'll ask for a seconder, which looks like...
Just a question though. How do we then incorporate in that the potential bequeathment that is there for the cemetery? Because when I spoke to our CFO about it, she indicated we would need them to produce a plan of what the money would
I think that's covered off by the funding opportunities, and we could provide Irene with the information about what she would need to do to access that particular funding stream.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're happy to second that? Okay. Are there any questions or additional comments? No? Okay. Well, we will put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Excellent. Thank you, everybody. That brings us to the conclusion of our open agenda. We will take a 10-minute break and then be back for public excluded. Shall I move into public excluded before we close? Actually? You can. I will. I'll move into public excluded before we close, actually. We do have a number of people who will be remaining in the public excluded session. I won't name them all independently, but basically people and expertise that is required in the room for the papers that we're considering. So with that in mind, could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for PX? Thank you, Councillor Tariha and Councillor Mawson. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. And we will reconvene at 11:45 a.m.